Well, there you have it. Two McLarens on the front row, Max Verstappen behind them in the Red Bull, Lando Norris on the pole, thousandths of a second separated the three of them, virtually the same lap time. But Lando not only got the pole, because he was quickest, but also he did the time on his first run in Q3. He deserves it for that, if nothing else, because both Oscar and Max had second runs on another new set of soft tyres. Lando had run out of tyres. He went out on a scrub set. He went out last on track as well, and he waited to see if his time was going to get beaten, but neither were able to do so, and Lando was able to cruise back into the pits, not record a second time back end of Q3, and take the plaudits for his pole position. Very well-earned pole position too. Brilliant lap by Lando, and as we said yesterday, he's found that wonderful rhythm, and McLaren looking really agile and superb, particularly through Sector 2. Let's have a look at how Max and Lando squared up on sector times around the Hungaroring lap. And I put Max and Lando together because we got a McLaren and a Red Bull, so there's a comparison there. Shouldn't in any way detract from the performance of Oscar Piastri. He was absolutely stunning in the second run in Q3, as I say. So let's have a look. Through Sector 1, Lando 27.6, Max 27.4. So a little bit quicker through Sector 1, maybe partly accounted for by the slightly faster speed through the trap, speed through the air of the RB20 Red Bull, 305 versus 304. That trap is just before the braking area going into turn 1. And then they got another DRS zone coming out of turn 1 as well. So the Red Bull really good out of there. Going through the turn 2, pretty much of a muchness, and just before the braking area into turn 4, the very quick left-hander where Charles Leclerc shunted yesterday, absolutely back to par, as we saw yesterday. But it was Sector 2 that did the damage for Red Bull, and where Lando Norris showed his unbelievable feel and touch through slow corners, particularly curbed change of direction chicanes. There's a third gear chicane in Sector 2, and then it's followed by a short straight and then a faster fourth gear chicane. And McLaren absolutely out of this world through that section of road. Lando 26.382 on his first run in Q3 on that new set of soft Pirellis, and on his second run, by which time he had found a couple of tenths through Sector 2, Max Verstappen 26.524. So that's still a sizable advantage in one sector for Lando Norris, and that could be a major advantage for him tomorrow in terms of tyre wear, tyre management. If he's got that sort of grip and traction advantage over the Red Bull, Max is going to have to work very hard to be close enough in the detection zone going into the last corner, which then gives you DRS through the pit straight and then out of turn 1. And that's assuming, of course, that he's in front of Oscar Piastri anyway. Two McLarens could easily dominate this race tomorrow. Control this race is probably a better word. So incredible performance from McLaren. As we said yesterday, they look really, really strong. Red Bull have got upgrades here, and they look pretty good on the car. The car looked pretty good, but still, in terms of slow corners, turn-in, and traction out of slow corners, McLaren have the advantage. And so that's how they qualified. Lando Norris 15.227, Oscar Piastri 15.249, Max Verstappen 15.273. There was a wild 2 minutes 13 seconds right at the end of qualifying when Yuki Tsunoda brought out a red flag after crashing the Visa Cash App special. Both Max and Fernando Alonso, old stagers you could say, quickly got out of their cars and said, nah, we're not going to do much in those last 2 minutes. But it was interesting to see the two McLaren drivers eagerly lining up in the pit lane to try to go out to see if they could beat the other. Tremendous competition between the two. They're both on scrub sets of softs. Not much was likely to happen, but McLaren had to go along with it. And as it happened, nothing did occur. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc similarly lining up in the pit lane to go out for a one-lap burst, but again, didn't get a result. But in the case of Daniel Ricciardo, he did go out, and he did manage to gazump his teammate because of that red flag, and then because he went slightly quicker. So it worked for Daniel Ricciardo. Nothing changed in the last 2 minutes. Behind those first three, really good performance. I was saying yesterday how well Carlos Sainz has been driving and how well he's been driving this weekend. Look at that, 15.696. Charles Leclerc, 15.905. And I think that's representative of where Carlos has been all weekend. He's just been slightly quicker than Charles, and he's been doing it with less error as well. We've seen Charles again today, a few lockups, a few running wides. He got the time in, but it was a scruffy looking lap. Carlos Sainz looks like the class act at Ferrari. Carlos Sainz, the driver, of course, they're getting rid of at the end of the year. We won't go down that path yet again. Well, not for the time being anyway. Lewis Hamilton starts P5 on the back of his Silverstone British Grand Prix win. Disappointing day for Mercedes. Maybe they're still recovering from the shock of the whole CrowdStrike thing, and maybe that's had some impact on their software, who knows. And look where George Russell is. Didn't get out of Q1. Had a moment. It was drizzly in Q1. They were all out on softs, no problem, slicks, but it was drizzly. He had a bit of a moment on his quickest lap, and then he didn't get a lap in after another red flag. So really disappointing day for George. And he was also shouting down the radio about the car not having enough fuel in right at the end of his run. And that's what it sounded like anyway. I hope that wasn't the case for Mercedes. They've had enough criticism when it comes to organisation and logistics in recent times. But if that did happen, and if George lost an opportunity to get through to Q2, Q3 because they didn't have enough fuel in the car, then I think we put that right up with Williams not bringing a spare chassis to the Australian Grand Prix this year. So Lewis Hamilton did a very good job. He was under pressure. He didn't get in great laps. There was a lot of traffic. It's very difficult to get a quick lap in at Hungary when you're following another car. A lot of debris coming out from under the car in front. And these cars are supposed to be easy to follow. Don't forget these new generation Formula One cars. But as we said yesterday, the Mercedes did not look the easiest of cars. Nothing like as agile and as chuckable and as comfortable to drive as a McLaren around the Hungaroring. But on this occasion, it's Ferrari with the slow corners of Hungaroring actually showing up Mercedes. We haven't seen that for a while. Charles Leclerc in the other car, 15.9. Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll did a pretty good job for Aston Martin to sort of drag those cars into Q3. Good operation during the difficult moments when it was maybe drizzling, when the track was reopening after red flag periods. Aston Martin on the ball there, doing a good job. And Fernando looking pretty good whenever he was out, but the pace obviously still not there in terms of slow corners, traction, and indeed, you got to say fast corner balance as well. They have got some upgrades. The car's looking a little bit better, but still quite a way to go, even to be challenging Mercedes at this point. Daniel Ricciardo, good job. He did that time right at the end of Q3, as I say, to beat his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, who was just ahead of him, of course. But then Yuki had a big and inelegant shunt coming out of turn 5. Just kind of understeered mid-corner, and it was a little bit drizzly, and got onto the artificial grass on the exit and straight into the barrier, and did quite a lot of damage to the Visa Cash car. So, yeah, not a good moment for Yuki Tsunoda. He looked pretty spiky all weekend around this circuit. Doesn't look quite as fluid as he has in recent times. Nico Hülkenberg, good job. Don't forget he had to give his car to Oliver Berman right at the beginning of practice yesterday, so he's done a good job, and as ever looked very good when the conditions were dodgy. Valtteri Bottas too said something like, well, that's all I've got, when he got out of the car at the end of Q2 in the Sauber. A better performance, probably the best performance we've seen from Sauber in terms of qualifying for quite a long time. Alex Albon didn't get out at the right time. Williams, he was quite critical of the Williams organisation on the radio in not getting him out at the right time. When he was on his quick lap, he ran into a lot of cars who were on their out laps, and of course you can't do that on a circuit with the lap as short as it is at the Hungaroring and with so many slow corners. Logan Sargent, reasonably good job, and benefited significantly from the red flag brought up for Sergio Perez, because just after going P5 in Q1, he locked up at turn 1, went into the tyre wall and damaged the Williams, and Williams did a very good job of getting that car repaired during that red flag break and getting him out again. So full marks to the team for that, even if their logistics later on were a little bit ropey. And then we get to Sergio Perez, the driver that Peter Windsor said yesterday could have a very good result this weekend. He's been looking good. He went off in the drizzle on slicks in Q1. Inexcusable for a driver of his experience. And I guess when I was saying yesterday that I thought he would go well, I wasn't thinking that it might be drizzly and he might be on slicks, in which case I wouldn't have said it, because that's not one of Sergio Perez's strong points. But I would say in his defence that before he went off, he had been only 1/10 slower than Max on his first run. Then Max went slightly quicker. He didn't come in for a new set of tyres. He went slightly quicker. He went about 2/10 quicker on the same scrub set of Pirelli softs. And Perez was behind him on the road, and I think he'd heard that time, and he was starting to go for it. He was quite quick in sector 1. And then he just lost it coming out of the third gear chicane that I was talking about earlier, where Lando Norris is so good. Just lost it, spun and crashed into the barrier. George Russell had a big moment there as well. It was greasy, there's no doubt about that, but George managed to contain the slide and hold it, as George would, whereas Sergio just completely lost the car and went backwards into the fence. Because Spa is next weekend, that's probably a good thing from Sergio Perez's point of view. I can't imagine that Red Bull, even if they're thinking now of replacing him with another driver, which I'm sure they are, they probably wouldn't do it before Spa because there isn't time to do all that stuff. They might. But so it's a good thing the Spa is there from Sergio Perez's point of view. But I think this shunt today for Sergio could well be the last straw for Red Bull. He hasn't gone well ever since he re-signed for his long-term contract. If there's a performance clause in there in which he has to be X number of points within reach of Max Verstappen, then for sure he's not going to be able to fulfill that. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Sergio Perez now. That accident could not have come at a worse time. And obviously the car is pretty good now. We're right up there with the McLarens. Yeah, Perez wouldn't have done a 15.2, but he might have done a 15.8, 15.9, something like that. And he might have been up there with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. So very disappointing for him, and disappointing for the two Alpine drivers who apparently were told to stay in the garage at the back end of Q1 because they didn't think the track was going to get any quicker. There'd been a bit of drizzle, then there'd been the red flag. Everybody went out. The track had got quicker, and neither of them got through to Q2. But with two drivers of that sort of talent, Pierre Gasly particularly good in greasy, semi-wet conditions, and also Esteban Ocon, it seemed crazy that they didn't have the cars out there, so very difficult to understand what's going on there. Flavio Briatore, please advise. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. McLaren, with that wonderful grip advantage they've got in Sector 2, could well protect their lead without too much trouble and be able to look after their tyres in a way that Red Bull may not be able to. So that could well be the deciding factor tomorrow. So yeah, looking forward to that very much. In the meantime, big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and to TrackNinja, and to you, of course, the viewer. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.